Grief and loss are always hard to talk about. Sometimes there are losses that feel socially unacceptable. We call those disenfranchised grief. In today's episode, we're going to talk about two of those examples, miscarriage and stillbirth.
To go from not wanting kids to this is the thing I want more than anything because, just feeling like, well, I'm supposed to do this. I'm supposed to be fruitful and multiply. And my body's supposed to be able to do it. So it was more like a lot of emotion with, I'm losing him, but why does my body keep failing me? Like, what have I done to myself that my body's not allowing me to produce a healthy pregnancy? I felt him for 33 weeks.
Absolutely.
And so I created a bond for 33 weeks. And no matter how prepared I was for the end, that's a life I'm going to mourn forever.
This is such a powerful conversation, and we are going to get right back to it after a word from our sponsor.
I'm Kevin Lee, President and CEO of Mid-America Transplant, and we are honored to sponsor this episode of Grief is Real, Big, Better Shared. At Mid-America Transplant, we have the privilege of working with families across southern Missouri and northeast Arkansas who make the heroic decision to donate their loved ones' organs or tissues. While donation often brings families comfort, they are still heartbroken by their loss. We are driven by compassion for these families and continue to walk with them through their grief journey. Mid-America Transplant provides several programs to help families memorialize their loved one, but we believe that some of the best support can be provided by a grief center. We are proud to work with the Center for Good Grief and appreciate everything they are doing in the region to bring healing to people who are coping with loss. Mid-America Transplant is inspired by life and by the donor families who give transplant patients a second chance at life. For more information about being a donor, visit sayyesgivelife.org.
Mercedes, just introduce yourself. Just take some time to introduce you.
Well, my name is Mercedes Spencer Marino. I'm a wife. I'm a Christian. I'm a teacher. And now I like to add, I'm a mom of angels. That's how I describe it.
I like that.
Because I used to not say, I don't have any children when people would ask, but now I'm like, no, I do. They're just not here.
That is a perfect place to start because that is a topic that comes up so much and people try to figure out, how do I answer this question? What do I say? And people will do exactly what you just said. They'll try out several different ways.
Right.
They'll try saying, I don't have any children. And then they're like, that feels maybe like a betrayal, or that didn't feel right. That made my stomach feel sick.
Right.
So what do I say? So
right.
Tell me a little bit about getting there to what feels right to you. You said you tried not saying something for a while.
So for a long time, we would just say, I would say, I don't have kids. Mario has kids because we are a blended family. And then last year, there was a conversation happening, like an icebreaker at school, the start of the school year. And people started talking about their kids and different things with kids. And I said, but I could relate to the conversation. So it was one of those things where it was like, do I chime in? Do I not? Because they're talking about kids, but I totally can relate to this. And I started my piece with, although I'm a mom of non-living children, and then I went on and said what I said, and the whole room just fell quiet because that's not something you hear. That's typically you hear, I don't have children, or I do have children. I've never heard anybody say that. But you chose the perfect word when you said betrayal, because I felt like when I didn't acknowledge them, especially with Miles, because we've had 3 miscarriages and 1 stillbirth. And so I tell people not to discount my miscarriages, but that stillbirth, it hit different.
Right.
Like, it's different when you're in 33 weeks.
Absolutely.
And it's different, like you're in 3 more weeks, you're going to have a baby. And my baby looked just like his father. So it was different this time. And so I was like, I cannot say I don't have children when I'm talking to large crowds. Now, there are times Mario can tell you, I would say, oh, I guess I'll just never be a mom, or I'll only be a fur mom. But when I get a chance to acknowledge my children, especially Miles, I take the opportunity to do that.
Our listeners can't see who's here with us, but I wanted to know if you could sort of describe who we have sitting here with us while we're talking today.
Can I give kind of the backstory of how this happened?
Absolutely.
So within 5 months of pregnancy, they told us that we were not likely. At that point, they said Miles would definitely pass. And so, of course, that takes, I went through a roller coaster of emotions, because it was like, that was the beginning of the end. And so I took time to let me make sure I make arrangements for when this happens. And one of the things was, I felt like I wanted to have him with me all of the time. And so when we made arrangements, I thought, well, I'm going to get him cremated so he can be with me all of the time. Well, I thought, I don't want a traditional urn, because every time somebody comes to my house, they're going to ask questions. And not that I would mind, but I'm not in the mood to talk about that every day.
Absolutely.
Or every visit.
Right.
And so I thought, let me find something that is suitable for a child. So I found a teddy bear urn, and it's perfect. It sits in our room with us. The tiny humans, our nieces, know not to play with him. Like, they refer to him as MJ.
Good.
My dog, whose toys are near MJ, my dog never touches MJ. Like, it's almost like everybody understands that is not a toy. But what has happened is, I keep a little teddy bear on my lunchbox, or on my backpack, or sometimes even on my nails. Like, my 2-year-old niece yesterday or 2 days ago said, Sadie, where's the teddy bear? Because she's so used to me having that on my nails. But I just try to find a way to keep him close. And so having this bear with his ashes, I just feel like it's a safe way to see him, a safe way to present him. Even Mario and I both have some of his ashes in our necklace, where we can wear it. Like, I typically wear mine every day. So this moment, I felt like today he should be here with me. I'm honoring him today. He should be present. So I brought him today.
And so the teddy bear is right here with us, and I'm honored that you did. I'm so glad that you felt comfortable, and that's a way that you're honoring and allowing us to honor with you, and to tell his story today too.
Yes.
So we started out with your introduction, but we want to get to the introduction of your son.
Yes.
And so you said you were 5 months.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about.
So, we found out we were expecting when we were in our second trimester. Okay. So I was a little excited, because in all of our other miscarriages, 2 of them, we didn't make it to the second trimester. Okay. And then the one in 2019, we did. Okay. And of course, we thought we were safe. We announced it literally weeks later. It started going downhill. Like, we went to find out the gender, and that's when we found out, actually, you're not going to, likely have a baby. Like, things are going wrong. So with this baby, we knew we were pregnant in September. So that was emotional, because we lost a baby in September. Like, I had to deliver all of those things. So we found out we were expecting in September. So it was a lot of emotions. But we didn't tell anybody.
Yeah.
Because I was like, we've gone through this several times before.
Sure.
I am not telling a soul. Our parents didn't know. Our friends didn't know. The doctors knew, and we knew. Right. And that was it. And I finally had to tell my boss, simply because I kept taking off of work. So eventually I had to come up with something.
Right.
And I even asked my boss, like, please don't share this with anybody. Like, it's hard enough when you go through a loss. It's even harder when every time you see somebody, people ask about it.
Sure.
So we didn't tell anybody. And then at 18 weeks, we started hearing things that were familiar. They didn't say right off, he wasn't going to make it, but they were like, just lots of things that were familiar. There's fluid on his lungs, all of these things. And I decided we should let our families know, for the sake of, if nothing else, just pray for us.
Sure.
And so I sent out a text and, it just explained we're 18 weeks. We have 18 more weeks. We would love for, we wanted to share this on a more joyous occasion, but Miles needs your prayers now, and we need your prayers now. And so it was like touch and go from there. And then in December, they confirmed he will for sure pass. And, I'm just thinking, well, when? And they couldn't tell me. And they were like, you could likely go full term, but this is going to happen. And I thought,
yeah.
And it's hard. Like, they gave the option for elective surgery to go ahead and, in essence, terminate the pregnancy. But he kept fighting. And I was like, well, if he's going to keep fighting, we're going to keep letting him, because we don't know what miracle can come from this.
Right.
And so he fought from December to March. And so it was just one of those where it was like, okay, Sadie, there are several women who never even get to feel a child move, get to have a heartbeat under theirs. There are several women who struggle getting here, and you have been blessed to get here. Yeah. So instead of focusing on the negative aspect, I was like, no, we are going to be thankful for the opportunity we have, and we're going to enjoy this time we have with our son.
So much grief before Miles even died. I mean, so much grief from, here we are again, hearing things that are familiar. I mean, the grief just began. Yeah. That anticipatory grief.
It was one of those. One of my nurses said it best. She said, I'm sorry, because while most people prepare for the beginning, you're having to prepare for the end. And so I knew that pregnancy was going to be the only time I had with my son. And so it was like, okay, we just have to figure this thing out. So I continued to talk to him like I would if I were expecting a live, healthy baby. We ended up even doing a maternity shoot for him, and just all of these things that I thought, I have to make sure I commemorate this moment, because like you said, the grief before, because we even decided this would be our last pregnancy. Just thinking like, I don't think I can go through this again, because a lot of our losses were back to back. And I was like, my heart can't. I can't do this again. And going through the process of delivering, and you're next door to somebody who's having, like, you hear a baby crying. So they're getting everything that you didn't get. And I thought, boy, I can't do this again. And so, it was a lot of different emotions going on at one time.
And I imagine too, those days, like you said, and you said it so well, like enjoying your time with Miles while you were pregnant and talking to him and feeling him, and that joy. But then also, I would imagine the immediate next thought was, but not for much longer.
Absolutely. Like, there would be times I would sit in my closet. Like, Mario knows, everybody knows I'm a crier. But sometimes, like, you kind of feel bad for always being emotional. So there would be times I would get in my closet and like, boo-hoo. And, you're always taught, don't question God on things. But there would be times I'm like, why? Just, like, I'm a good person. I'm nice to familiar, to strangers. Like, I do what I believe is the right thing all the time. So why is this happening to me? And just thinking, because people who know me know that I never wanted to have children. Like, I was never that girl that had names picked out. I never wanted to get married. We see that changed. So to go from not wanting kids to like, this is the thing I want more than anything, because, just feeling like, well, I'm supposed to do this. I'm supposed to be fruitful and multiply. And my body's supposed to be able to do it. Right. So it was more like a lot of emotion with, I'm losing him, but why does my body keep failing me? Right. Like, what have I done to myself that this, my body's not allowing me to produce a healthy pregnancy? So lots of times where, like you said, finding joy, but then immediately, like falling into where I felt like I was being punished for something in life.
Yeah, you described so many facets of grief there with the, feeling punished, but also then the thing that we do sometimes of like, well, my body is failing, and kind of going there. And then the millions of why questions and the spiritual aspects of grief. And that's why grief is so exhausting, because it comes at you from so many different places in so many different ways. And taking the time with that grief, which sounds like you have done.
I am going to say I am so grateful for what you all do. And I am so grateful. Like I told Christy this, like, I needed her. And she says all the time, like, no, you're doing the work. And I'm like, no, I needed you, because I didn't realize how this was changing me and how it was affecting my day to day, and how I remember one time describing it as, I feel like I'm a shell of myself. Like, I'm feeling all of these emotions, and then in the morning I wake up and I have to put on for everybody else. Right. So I have to like put myself in this other body that's not me anymore. And I remember telling her, like, Christy, I have figured out I'm grieving the old me too.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that was like the strangest thing to me, because I knew I was different, but I didn't know how to get back to where I was. And later on, I realized if I even wanted to be that girl, but I was grieving who I was before the loss. Yes. Because I felt like this has changed me and I don't know how to come back from this. And so I'm better now, but boy, it took some time. And it took that image she gave me with, it looks like scribbles all over the paper. And she was like, this is grief. And she just talked about, like, Mercedes, what I've learned from you is I like to be in control of things. That's just type A teacher right there.
You're in good company.
And so it was like, okay, I was going through this stage. Okay, now this stage is supposed to be over. We're supposed to be on to the next thing. And when it wasn't happening that way, like, there were times I would be on a high where you were like, oh, Sadie's back. And then the next day you're like, why is she crying all day? Like, what happened? Yeah. And so that was one of the things, like, that's why y'all are key, because you all were helping me understand that grief is not linear. Right. And I have to be okay with grief not being linear. And that, and when I was taught that made a world of difference for me being able to cope with things.
Sure. Well, especially like you said, the type A side of us, and like I said, you're in good company, we want it to be sort of this orderly, predictable thing. Yes. And it is the complete opposite. Yes. But I also so appreciate your honesty with just grieving who you were before. Yeah. And I think that's something that is very surprising to newly grieving people, because you already feel so different, but then you don't feel like yourself. You feel like your old self is over there and I'm over here, and almost in the strange land of like, how do I do anything?
Yes. Like, I shared with, I don't know if it was Mario or a friend, I said, well, now in hindsight, maybe I was depressed or something. Like, it did feel like I'm in this strange barren land. No pun intended on barren. Yeah, but this strange barren land where it was like, there's this person I used to be. I don't know where I am right now, how I got here, and how I fix it. And I think that was the problem is I'm the fixer for family, for friends, everything. But it was like I couldn't fix myself. How do I get myself out of here? But how did I get here? And then even realizing that MJ's death impacted me more than I thought it had. Like, I thought I was prepared. You know, they told me at 5 months. I had made his memorial arrangements. I had even contacted a photographer that specializes in photographing stillbirths. Like, I had everything planned out. I was ready, but I wasn't.
No. You weren't ready for that grief. And we can prepare as much as possible, but it changes everything.
Right. Absolutely. And I think a lot of people, because in my friend circle, I'm the only one who has experienced a stillbirth. I do have friends who have had miscarriages, but nobody has had a stillbirth. And even like some of our friends who have had miscarriages or family, they have other children. And not that they're replacements, but these women do understand what it is to be a mom of living children.
Yes.
And for me, it's, well, now I know I'll never be that. And so for me, it was nobody knows what I'm going through. So they couldn't help me. I couldn't help me. So it was just a world of crazy and just me thinking like, I'm supposed to be over this already. And in reality, other people thinking she's supposed to be over this already. But I think sometimes people forget this is a death.
Absolutely.
And whether it is, you know, he was born sleeping or not, I felt him for 33 weeks.
Absolutely.
And so I created a bond for 33 weeks. And no matter how prepared I was for the end, that's a life I'm going to mourn forever.
Absolutely.
And like just explaining it, like you don't just mourn first steps and first words. No. Like you mourn high school prom, you mourn graduation, you mourn the wedding, you mourn like this life you thought you would experience. I mourn grandchildren because I know I'll never get to be a grandmother.
That's right.
And so it's one of those things where I think a year later, because tomorrow will be his first heavenly birthday, I think a year later it's shocking to people that I'm still grieving him. But I don't think people realize I'm grieving the life or the experiences I'll never get to have as well.
Absolutely. And I just appreciate your honesty. And you just said that better than probably I could say it or anyone else is what you're mourning and grieving is the loss of the future. And like you said, and I'm so appreciate you saying that tomorrow's his heavenly birthday, you know, your brain instinctively thinks a year, what would be happening now? What would be the milestones? What would be, instead you have different milestones.
Right.
But you will do that. You will forever be calculating what would Miles be doing now?
Right.
What would that potentially look like? You'll see other people and be wondering. Yeah.
Right.
And that's your grief. And you're so right. People just, miscarriage and stillbirth, they are griefs that are considered disenfranchised. I'm sure you and Christy talked about that. Because, and what that means is it means socially unaccepted. I think it's really socially not understood. People don't understand because they think, and I've had people say this to me, well, I mean, they didn't have their baby. Their baby was born sleeping, so they didn't make memories. And it's, well, they did make memories that whole time that baby was growing.
Right.
Every move, the way you talked to him, you know, sang to him, probably read him books, you know, but you were also planning your future. Well, this is what we'll do, even though you were told at some point, but there's still always hope.
Right.
And and maybe this will be different.
And that hope was there. That's why I felt like I'm not going to terminate this pregnancy because he's still fighting.
Right.
And so, you know, you never know. He may come out and be just fine. Right. You know, this may be one of those miracles that I get to talk about over and over. And he still is a miracle. I get to talk about over and over because I feel like my tagline this year has been his stillbirth led to my rebirth. And
Mercedes.
I got to know me in ways that I did not know myself my entire life. I feel like even my relationship with God elevated, and I got saved when I was 8 years old. Like I declared Jesus my Lord and Savior at 8. But at 33, it was different because I felt like, man, I guess everything else was a surface level relationship because now
grief will change you, won't it?
Oh, absolutely. And so it is one of those things where I just feel like he is the miracle that keeps on giving, because by me telling my story and his story, let's be honest, unfortunately, there are several women out there who are experiencing the same thing.
Absolutely.
But they have not heard or spoken with anybody who can wholeheartedly relate.
Absolutely.
And so I felt like I'm giving to give the miracle of, I'm going to be there for somebody. I'm going to be that voice that somebody hears and they say, okay, this is hard, but I can get through this. And it does not have to be the end all be all of me or my child's story. And so I just feel like this is why I needed to do this. So he is still a miracle. It just happened in a different way.
I remember when you and I first talked, because one of our other episodes is Molly's story about Hayes, and you said you had listened to that.
I had.
And I think it's probably one of our episodes that's the most listened to because of what you just said. There's so many people out there, won't talk about grief in general, but definitely I think women with stillbirth and miscarriages just feel so isolated, don't know who they can talk to. And so sharing your story does help so many and helps.
Absolutely.
Hopefully, I believe this, we've seen it with Molly's podcast, help women and their entire families, their husbands just mourn well. And I've heard you say that while you're sitting here. You talk so much about mourning. And I love that because a lot of times people will just focus on grieving, which grief is the thoughts and feelings. But mourning is the expression. Mourning is what heals us. Mourning is what carries us to be healthy people in this community.
Right. I think like me hiding in the closet and doing that, now I don't. There are times, as much as I'm a crier, I never do it in a professional setting. But last week I cried at school. And my students know portions of my journey because I want them to understand that, one, your teachers are human.
Yes.
Two, life happens. And it doesn't always happen as sunshine and rainbows.
Right.
And then just thinking, I want them to know that things are not going to always be okay. But we'll eventually be okay. So even when I left last week, they were like, do you have therapy today? Okay, I hope your session goes well. Because I like to share those things with them. We have this stigma that it's not okay to grieve. It's not okay to go to therapy. And I'm like, we have to change that.
Yes, we do.
We have people who are equipped to help us sort out things. Just as if our cars need service, we go to a mechanic.
That's
Sometimes our emotions need service. So we have to go check in with our emotional mechanic. And so just being able to allow myself to feel and not feel ashamed about it. And if it has to happen in any space, in any capacity, then not only do I have to be okay with it, but I feel like my tribe also has to be okay with it.
Yeah. I love that. And, you talk about crying in the closet, and I'll just say there's so many people that's, especially in those first few days and weeks and months, so much crying happens in closets because we're so in survival mode. And it's because we're different, but we look out at everybody else and they all seem the same. And that's such a weird thing. So I think that's why the closet draws us in. It's a safe space, but learning how to come out of that closet and share that grief with others is so critically important. And I love that you even share parts of it with your students, because I think you're right. One, we have to talk about mental health. We have to help normalize counseling. And just like we would take our car in, I always say, if you broke your arm, most people are not just going to let it heal out there. They're going to go to the doctor and get what they need. And so, taking those time for those emotions is so important.
I agree. I think it's important to also help people understand. And so one of my coworkers turned friends, we connected because she's experienced loss as well. And she said something one day, because I was upset that people weren't checking in how I thought they should and things like that. And she was like, well, you got to remember, they don't know what to do either. You don't even know what to do with yourself right now. They don't know either. Right. And just me thinking oh, that's true. In the same way that you have to teach your spouse what you need in a spouse. You have to teach, I teach my students what I need in their behavior, what I what my expectations are. I have to do the same thing with my family and friends, because this is not something they've had to navigate before. It's not something I've had to navigate. So she was absolutely right in, no, you have to teach people what to do, and you have to have some grace, and you have to have some patience. And so it made me think back to, I will never forget this. I was in elementary school. One of my classmates, his parents were getting a divorce. I didn't think it was a big deal. And I realized I didn't think it was a big deal because I had never known my parents as a couple.
Oh, sure.
So I couldn't understand the grief that came with a divorce. And so now at 34, way past elementary, I was like, Sadie, you didn't have an emotional connection and you couldn't be there for your friend because you couldn't understand it. And so I'm like, no, now you have to put it in words where people can understand so that they know how to support you. And of course, if my childhood friend could have explained that, I could have been more sympathetic. But I'm like, you got to remember that. And so when people aren't responding or checking in how you think they should, make sure you are vocal about your needs so that they know how to show you love and support. And then that way you're getting what your heart is craving.
Yeah, that's so important. And that's so hard to do in the early days when you're just surviving. But I think you're definitely right. At some point, and in those early days, people are usually coming and surrounding you. But there's somewhere after a couple of weeks and months, it feels like everybody goes back to their normal. And I do think it's important for us to be able to say out loud to people, this is what helps me. This is what I need. I've had to do that with my own grief. I've had to check myself almost and say, people cannot read your mind. And I'm so well, they should be able to, but they can, and we can. And so it's another thing that kind of makes grief exhausting for the griever sometimes. But I think when you can figure out a way, and if you can start with your inner circle, your tribe, and because you can usually be a little bit more open with them about, hey, this is what is helpful to me, this is what is not, this is what I need, then I think we can learn how to do it kind of in a bigger picture as well.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm also going to do a plug here for people who are the strong friends. And so for the people who are around the strong friends, I'm the strong friend. I'm the crier, but I'm the strong friend. I'm the strong sister. I'm the strong daughter. I am one of those go-to people just for everybody.
Yes.
And I think in the early days, even people weren't showing up because they felt like Sadie's the strong one. 2, Sadie's been through this before. 3, Sadie was already preparing for this. So it was kind of like people took a step back thinking, well, she was ready. She knew what was happening. She's fine. And, she'll figure, if anybody else figures out a way, if nobody else figures out a way, Sadie would figure out a way. But what people didn't realize is no, I was not figuring it out. And I was like, even if people could let me just send a text, because I'm one of those people too. When I don't know what to say, I'm like, should I just not say anything? Because I can't ask, my family jokes about, I always ask, are you sad? Knowing that people are sad. That's my way of checking in, because I don't know what to say. But thinking now, even when I'm uncomfortable and I don't know what to say while somebody else is grieving or mourning, I'm like, just say something. Just say, I'm praying for you, or I'm thinking of you, or something. And so in the early days and even in the latter days, that's what I wanted and that's what I needed. But of course, like I said, I have to be patient with them because they didn't know.
Right.
I didn't express that because, like you, I want people to be able to read my minds because my mind, because I feel like I'm really good at reading people's minds.
Exactly.
So I'm like, y'all need to step your game up.
Right.
But it was one of those where now I'm like, hey, if you didn't share it with them, you can't expect it from them.
Yeah.
And because that's not fair. And so one of the things, just for people who are listening to this, like who are just trying to figure out, how do I support, my brother, my sister, my cousin, my whomever the parents are who experienced the loss, just like check in, even if it's a hello, thinking of you, or something like that, because in that space, we feel so alone and we almost like either we don't feel seen or we feel like a spectacle. Like I felt like everywhere I went, everybody was talking about me losing the baby. Literally for 6 months, everywhere, I avoided family functions because I felt like I already know that's going to be the topic, especially because it would be the first time people would see me.
Right.
So, of course, it's going to be the topic, and I don't want to talk about that. And so just check in to see what they need. And then for people who experienced the loss, make sure you're vocal about what you need. That way they can support you in the way that you need to be supported.
What about the people who say, I don't know what I need? How did you navigate that? Because I'm sure there were
That's
days.
honest too, because there were days I did not know. Like Mario, I felt so bad for my husband because Mario tried his best to be there for me. And I felt like it was never what I needed, but I couldn't say what I need. I didn't know myself what I needed, but I felt like I need somebody to figure this thing out because I need support. And so for the people who don't know, I just say let yourself feel what you feel, but also give your people time to figure you out too, because you haven't figured you out.
Right.
Because there were times I'm like, I don't know if I'm worthy of even still being here. I don't know if I'm worthy of going out of my, I wouldn't leave my house. I just felt like I wasn't worthy of being talked to, of being seen. I wasn't being kind I wasn't being mean to myself, but I wasn't being kind to myself either. So that's honest, but I felt like that's why having Christy there and just showing up, there were times I didn't want to be there either because I felt like we're going to talk about this again and it's going to show I'm not worthy of, my body's not worthy of experience, all of these things, but just showing up each time and talking through whatever she felt we needed to talk through. That's why, like I said, being with the professional you need in whatever way you're in need, because what she did was it forced me to sort through things that I couldn't navigate myself. And so even when they don't know what they need, that's why it's important to talk to somebody, just getting those emotions out, because as you formulate these sentences, your brain is sorting through all of these things. And so just show up. When you don't know what you need, just show up.
Well, I like that you talked about that with counseling, because, showing up with Christy, because people will say, they'll wake up and they know they have a counseling appointment that day and they'll think, sometimes, and it's because it's I know I'm going to go there and it's work. It's hard work, and then, but showing up, I'm wondering, because it sounds like you had days like that, but it sounds like at the end of your sessions, the feeling was different.
Oh yeah. I was always like, I'm so glad I came because I couldn't express to Mario what was happening. I couldn't put those things into words, but Christy would, ask me a certain question or something that just made me think through things and made me even sometimes see them from a different perspective. Like all the time I would say, I feel like I'm going backwards. I feel like I'm regressing. She's like, no, you're not. This is a part of the journey. Like you are moving forward. And just hearing things like that where like, just like affirming that what you're going through is normal.
Yeah.
And like, this is a normal stage. And like me not beating myself up about, you had a time frame to get back to normal and you're not there.
Right.
And like Chrissy's like, no, that's not how this works. And just the other day, she was like, you know, it could be a year from now, 10 years from now. Like you never know when these things will come back, but they will come back.
Yeah. Because
really they're always there and that's okay.
Right. And I think it's that realization of, I can't go back to who I was before. And so when we're grieving and when we're type A grievers, we're trying so hard to get back to that.
Yes, and because that's safe.
Exactly. Because I don't know this new land. Exactly. And it's when we have that like realization of, oh, I am different. I am forever changed. You know, my son is with me, but it's in this different, it's not in this physical context.
Right.
And navigating that. And that is hard. It is the hardest work.
Absolutely.
And that's why people don't want to do it. I mean, none of us want this, you know. You didn't ask for this. This happened. And coping. And I want to go back to something you said with Mario and just other people in your life, because it's so important, is to give our partners, to give our families, to give our inner circles grace.
Yes.
And patience. They're grieving too. We're all grieving differently. They care, obviously, your support system cares so much about you. It's so obvious. And so to remember to give them grace. It's hard when you're in the depths of your grief.
Yeah.
I know that I can remember sometimes saying, I know that you're really trying and I appreciate that. Please don't give up on me. I just don't know.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Mario would... So you saying like people grieve differently? I was not okay with that in the beginning because I would be crying and I never saw Mario crying and I was like, do you not miss her baby?
Right,
like what? You know,
right.
Like I would get on to him all the time and Christy was like, he's grieving differently.
Yeah.
And also I had to realize he could be curling up in the closet crying too.
Exactly.
You know, like in the same way I was hiding it, he could also be hiding it. And so I had to come to terms with, is this okay for him to not cry in front of you or not cry at all? Right. That does not mean he does not miss your son. In the same way, like my mom would show up to my house, but she's like, oh, I have a Zoom meeting right now. And I'm like, girl, I'm over here bawling my eyes out. What do you mean you're on a Zoom meeting? But it was that she showed up and that was her way of showing support. And it could also be that she was grieving as well. So maybe the meeting was her way of, okay, I can't cry now because my daughter needs me. So I'm going to do this other thing I'm responsible for and go from there. And so just me learning like, everybody is not going to cry too. And everybody's not going to cry in front of everybody. And you have to be okay with that.
Yeah. And that's hard, right? Because you're so not okay with anything. And then all of a sudden you have to have capacity for your own weird, different, strange, odd emotions. And then theirs too. And you're exhausted and all the things. And that's why I just come back to all the time. Grief is just so messy and different, you know, sometimes hour to hour, minute to minute, day to day. But I want to talk about Miles for just a minute. I'm curious about his name. And where did his name come from? Why did you? And I hear you call him MJ.
We do. We are a family of M's because both of our first names and last names start with M's. And I know people don't care for the Kardashians, but my dream was to have, like, you know, they have all the K's. I was like, we got to have all the M's.
I love it.
So I was like, that's what we're going to do. But I really liked the nickname MJ, even for a girl. Like, I thought that's so cute because we would joke about like Mercedes Jr. or we could do Mario Jr.
Love it.
And then, but the name Miles just... I thought of it one day and it just felt
Okay.
good. Like there was no significant, like there's anybody else I know with the name Miles, but it was just like, this feels good. This is my baby's name. And then his middle name, Jameson.
Okay.
Actually, I had a student named Jameson, who like, he took care of me like I was his mama.
Oh.
And so like, he like, I don't know, it was just one of those things where his mama shared him with me in a sense. Like, she let me call him son, all of these things. I actually have so many kids at school that I'm, they claim me as mama, but this was like the first kid to say like, you're like a mom to me. And he looked out for me like I was his mama, like would carry my bags to the car if needed. Just all of these things that other kids didn't think about. And so I thought, I just absolutely love this name because I love this kid who took the time to check in with me as the human instead of checking in with me as the teacher.
Yeah.
And so, there's MJ.
There's MJ. Oh, yeah. Well, I think it's a beautiful name, and MJ, because I've heard you call him that. So I was curious about the nickname too, because that's so special. And I want to talk too just a minute about how you continue to honor him and his life and memorialize him and the teddy bear. And so it sounds like the teddy bear is your theme that you carry through.
It is now. It was never before, but now it is. Okay. And even my doctor, she knew like the plan of getting him this urn and all of these things. So when I birthed him, I had a little memento box waiting for me, and I didn't know when I got home and opened it, she had all of these teddy bears and teddy bear theme things. And I was like, it just feels good to know that people listen to you. Yes. And so it's just, I don't know, like the teddy bear just makes me feel like he's always with me. Like I said, whether, it's on my backpack or on, like people just notice. And I was like, that's my way of bringing him up. Or even like if I'm in casual conversation and something comes up and I'm like, oh, another thing my son taught me. And I find myself saying that often. Like I used to preface it with, although my son never breathe a breath on earth, my son taught me. And now just all the time I'm like, another thing my son taught me was to relinquish control and let go of that type of
so you don't feel like you have to explain it now. Right. He's your son. Right. You don't have to explain that he's not here on this physical earth. Yeah, he's your son.
Like my students, we were reading, I don't know if anybody's ever read the myth of Daedalus and Icarus. And so one of the lines in the myth says the father who's no longer a father or something like that. Oh. And I had my kids, I was like, can y'all explain that to me? And they were like, well, what they're saying is, and they were like, but that's the thing. He's still a father even because that was still his son. Right. And so then I go into explaining, I believe it's a Reagan quote about, like a woman who loses her husband is a widow, and the child who loses a parent is an orphan, but there is no word for a parent who loses a child. And so we, discussed like, well, what is that? And one of my kids said, well, they're just not a parent. Like, they're just a person. They're not a parent. And like the rest of my kids were like, wait, so are you saying Mrs. Moreno is not a mom? Because she, and like, in a sense, it made me feel good. Right. Right. I took over him. I was like, don't beat him up. Right. This is his opinion. Yeah. But it made me feel good for them to start realizing like, hey, there is no word for this, but this experience does exist. And it's real. And we can't dismiss it. It is real. Yeah. And so that's why even when they hear me say my son, they know exactly who I'm talking about. If they hear me say, I'm mom to angels, they know exactly what I'm talking about. And so it's one of those things where I'm like, we just have to as parents of non-living children, as parents of angels, like, be okay with still mentioning them.
Absolutely.
Like, still honor them.
Yes.
And then other people just have to, like, we just have to normalize it is okay to talk about your children
Yes.
who have gone to heaven before you.
Absolutely. Normalizing it. I mean, just like we were talking earlier, just about mental health and grief and emotions, but what you're doing for these 10th graders, because again, we don't know what the future lies ahead for them.
Right.
But we do know that grief is the most universal experience. It doesn't matter gender, race, religion, income, anything. So we know that they will grieve. And what you're teaching them, in that classroom is, I mean, that's the stuff that they will remember. They will likely, sadly, we don't want them to, but we know at some point they will likely be grieving. And I do think they will lean back on what you have taught them.
And that's what I hope. I hope that they remember, like Mrs. Moreno went through this. My students in my last school, when I was still Miss Spencer, like, they were there when I lost, I call him OG MJ. They were there when I lost him. And just, like, I want them to know that things happen and it's not always good things. Like, I remember after I lost OG MJ, I took a week off just because I wasn't ready to face everybody. And my old city, my old town is a small town. So everybody knew. And when I returned, I told my principal, I said, I got to have a day to talk to them. Like, we can't get into a lesson like everything is normal because I've left them for a week and they know why. And just talking with them, I remember one of my students said, I know you're a Christian. How do you believe in God after this? And I thought, okay, here we go.
Yeah.
And I said, well, he never said we weren't going to go through things. And I said, do I like what I went through? Absolutely not. I am not going to pretend and sit here like everything's fine. I was like, did I question God? Absolutely. Was I mad? Absolutely. I said, but the key is I trust him. And so coming back to that years later, when people ask, like, how are you not mad? And I said, it's because I trust him. Again, are my feelings hurt? Yes. But I feel like, but what I told Mario, I said, what I have to think about is God knows best. A lot of people don't know I've had lots of health scares in my life. Lots of times that the doctor's like, we don't even know how you're still alive. Like, we just don't get how you're still functioning. And I said to Mario, I said, what if I had carried and birthed and everything went normal, what if it would have cost me my life? And God wasn't ready for that yet. And about a week later, I heard a sermon online and it said, God's not asking you to do anything he didn't do. He too sacrificed the son for the greater good. And I thought, what if he saved me because I needed to tell this story to get people closer to him? And so it's one of those things where I can stomach that. Like, I have made sense of it. I've made peace with it. Does it still hurt sometimes? Absolutely. When, like, I have a coworker who was due around the time I was. So now that her baby's having milestones, I'm like, oh, her baby's trying to talk. Her baby's sitting up. Her baby, So I'm keeping up with where Miles would be from her baby. But it's just one of those things where I'm like, maybe this is what he needed me to do. He needed me to spread his gospel. And on the human side of things, people needed somebody who understood. And maybe
you have such a presence of doing that. It's, I mean, just your presence, your honesty, your vulnerability, it just shines through you. And what do you think, for people who are listening to this and maybe just recently grieving a miscarriage, stillbirth, what do you think is kind of like the key thing they need to know? Meaning, what do you really wish you would have known in that very beginning?
I really wish I would have known. really, it's okay to not be okay.
Okay.
And there is nothing you could have done, you could have said, you could have changed that would have made an impact on the outcome. You did not do anything wrong.
Right.
Usually we blame ourselves, especially as women. You think you did something or you didn't do something. And then, like I said, just thinking too, like, well, what have I done to my body that it's not doing what it's supposed to do? Because we are wired to believe that everybody can have a healthy pregnancy whenever they want to.
Right.
And not understanding, and that's why the work that y'all do is so important, that not everybody has a healthy pregnancy.
Right. Tomorrow, heavenly birthday. Talk to me about preparing for the heavenly birthday, and what are you going to do? So
I have not settled on anything.
Okay.
That's how I know I'm growing out of my type A, where I'm like, I would have had everything planned already, but I'm like learning to go with the flow. Actually, that's something I learned during my pregnancy was like, there is nothing you can do to control this situation. So go with the flow.
Okay.
And so tomorrow, the one thing I'm certain on is, we're going to walk a mile. I call it a mile for miles.
Okay.
And we did it last year on National Angel Baby Day, where my family and friends came out. Even people from my old town came, like my old school came to support. And we just walked a mile around the park in honor of Miles. And so I told my family, I was like, for sure, that's what I want to do tomorrow. I am considering... I have a video of his heartbeat. It was the last video I took before everything happened. I've considered going to Build-A-Bear, letting them record it and putting it inside of his urn.
Yes.
But I don't know. Like, I'm just thinking, I'm going to wake up tomorrow and do whatever my heart says we need to do. Instead of me telling myself what we're going to do, I'm going to let myself tell me what we need to do.
Yes.
So that's all I have so far. Just, like...
That's so important because it's so important to have a plan, and it's so important to do something. You've said it this whole time, the memorialization, the mourning is what heals us. And so you have enough of a plan. You're not going to pull the covers over your head and avoid the day.
Right.
You might do that for a little bit, and that's okay.
Right.
But you have enough of a plan that it does sound like you can let yourself wake up tomorrow and say, what do I need today? What feels right?
Right. What feels right? And so I just figured, like you said, I'm going to wake up. We're going to walk a mile, and then I'm going to go from there. Like, what would I have wanted to do with him today? Or what would feel good to do for him today? Because I do feel like I definitely need to commemorate his time here. And so I even thought, would I want to wake up and do a live video? Because I've avoided things like this this entire year. And so do I wake up and, let people into my mind and into my heart to see how I've been processing this. Also the growth I've had.
Absolutely.
Because that's been different too. And especially because last week was emotional for my family as well. We had another baby in our family. It was a boy. Nobody's ever gotten pregnant with boys but me.
Oh, wow.
We call ourselves a girl gang. Born at the same hospital as MJ. And so, last week was rough. Just wanting to be there for my sister, but also honoring my own feelings.
Good.
And so I think that has allowed me to kind of go ahead and start letting those emotions, letting myself feel. And so I even considered tomorrow going to see the baby because I've not seen him yet.
Okay. Yeah.
We have put it off because they were at the hospital, and Mario said, I can't do it.
Sure.
He said, like, I wanted to be present for my sister. So I had to like muster up the strength to be able to do it. But Mario said, Mercedes, I can't go back there. And I had to honor that because again, everybody grieves differently.
Right.
And I was proud of him for vocalizing how he felt. Cause you know, most times men just hold back to protect, you know, their women. And so I was like, he's been protecting me this whole time. And so for him to say, I can't do it, I have to honor that. But I thought even tomorrow, after we walk our mile, like maybe we go see our nephew and just, you know, have a full circle moment. Like we didn't get a boy last year, but we did this year. And we're going to love him in the same way we would have loved MJ.
Yeah. And if you wake up tomorrow and tomorrow's not the day, I think you are the type of person that will say, I'm still going to love that baby and I'm still going to meet him, but maybe not today, or maybe it is today.
Right. And I think my sister who, like, she's my person, I'm her person. I would say both of my sisters were really good for doing that with each other. But she's very understanding because she has suffered a loss before too. And so typically, like, there have been times I have changed my mind like 2 minutes later and she's like, okay, I get that. I understand. So,
and that support is so critical, and just the understanding and the willingness to grieve with you and let you grieve at your own pace, and knowing that it's not personal.
Right.
I think that is so important, because even just what you said, that's a lot of triggers in 1 week.
A
boy, the same hospital, a baby.
Yeah.
You know, we as people, we're wired to feel more than one thing. So you can feel joy and happiness for them, but that doesn't mean that you don't feel your grief as well.
Right.
Especially thinking, well, what were we doing a year ago?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, that was the thing, pulling up to the hospital. It was like, the last time I was here, all of these things were happening. But to your point of feeling multiple emotions simultaneously, I have learned that I'm always going to feel sadness and happiness simultaneously. And that's okay. Like, it's okay for those things to coexist, because it reminds me that he was real.
Yes.
But it also reminds me that I'm still living.
Yes.
And so, like, I can mourn him while also enjoying life as well. And so he's present in all of those moments. And honestly, as hard as it was, I wouldn't trade that for anything in the world.
That's really powerful. It's really powerful. And I think when you can reconcile what you just said, I'm going to feel happy and sad all the time, you know, and you stop kind of trying to fight it and be like, I'm going to get this sadness out of here. I'm going to figure out. And just realizing that it's part of it, you know, because you are going to grieve him all of your days. Because you're missing him all of your days.
Yeah. And there will be triggers all of my days, because like I said, with having another boy in the family now, having a baby now, having that coworker who was due around the same, like there are always going to be things to remind me of him. Even like my dog, who really was how I found out we were expecting. Just even my dog, Sweet Piper, like she just does things all the time, where every so often she might sniff my stomach, or like today she went and gave the urn a doggy kiss and walked off, and I was like, oh, my heart. You know, but like there's always going to be something. But one thing I am reminding myself of is beauty from ashes. And like, it is going to be okay, because God is creating something beautiful from this moment of sadness, this moment of death. Like, there is something good that's coming from it.
Well, I think I can say and probably everyone who's listening is so much good of just being able to hear your honesty and your vulnerability and just you being real and sharing your story and sharing your son with us today. And just helping others hear your grief experience, hear that hope is possible, healing is possible, and that is through mourning. And I just hear so much of that in what you shared with us today.
Absolutely. Thank you. And that it's okay, because that's how I remember hearing this from Molly and Hayes' story, that it's not about getting over it. Like, it's about going through it, getting through it. Like, there's never going to be a time that it's going to be over. And one thing that I just think as humans try to do is let's hurry to scoot the bad.
Yeah,
out of
absolutely.
The way. Like, let's just hurry up and get past this. And once you get past this, it'll be fine.
Everything will be fine. Yeah.
Right. But that really doesn't exist. And so it's just one of those things where when I heard Molly say that, I was like, what a profound way to say that. And that has carried me through my journey, that you're not going to get over it, but you'll be able to, like, every day get up and walk through it.
And with your support system, with reaching out for counseling, I think just who you uniquely are, you are doing that. I think you're doing it every day. And as we wrap up, is there anything else that you felt you wanted to share, or you feel like we haven't talked about?
No, I'm just going to do a plug for you guys again. Like, to all the people who are going through this experience, or know people who are going through this experience, like, seek help when you need it. Even if it's just a listening ear, even if it's not a professional counselor, like, just seek help or be help, because sometimes people don't really want to talk. They just want others to talk. They just want to share. And so for the people going through it, share. And for the people who are supporting, just be there. Just like, sometimes you know, like, your presence is enough. You don't have to be doing things. Just be there.
The gift of listening.
Yes.
And I think those who are supporting the grievers so badly want to have the perfect thing to say. I get asked that all the time. What is the perfect thing to say? Or they want to have the fix, because we live in a world of fixers. And when you're supporting someone who's grieving, there is not a thing you can do to fix them. They are not broken. It is about showing up and listening.
I love the way you put that. They are not broken. There's nothing to fix. Just show up and listen.
Well, thank you for being with us today. Thank you for sharing your babies, your angels, and Miles, and bringing him here with us today, and just for your vulnerability and your honesty. I think you have really been able to help people see the good that you have found in your grief and the mourning that you have done and that you continue to do. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank y'all.
Grief does heal. Let me say that again. Grief does heal. But like we've said, grief demands attention and care. It also needs support and patience. Remember that your grief is a reflection of your love. You are not alone. The world is full of many grievers like you. You can learn more about us at www.baptistgriefcenters.org. You can check out our YouTube channel, Baptist Centers for Good Grief. You can check out our podcast wherever you get your podcast. Also, know that you can reach out and let us know if there's a topic that you're interested in learning more about. You're welcome to email me at angela.kelly@bmhcc.org. That's angela.kelly@bmhcc.org. And remember, grief is real, big, better shared. We'll talk soon.